So yeah, every morning the HOA queen herself parks that cherry red Porsche right across my gate, like the whole street belongs to her. Every damn morning, I see the same scene. Tires pressing against the curb, exhaust curling through my hedges, and that smug smile carved across her face. You know the feeling, don't you? When someone keeps stepping over your line, thinking you're just a widower who can't do much besides complain. When politeness turns into a useless shield. Well, that morning, she made the biggest mistake of her privileged life. She picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. Ever wanted to teach someone like that a lesson they'd never forget? Let me start from the beginning. The first roar broke the silence like a drill through glass. I stepped to the window, coffee in hand. Veronica Sterling, 54, president of the Oakwood Heights HOA, unfolded from the driver's seat in her cream suit. Her hair curled over one shoulder, catching sunlight like a blade. She waved toward my camera with a lazy flick of her hand, a motion that dismissed the world. 5 minutes. Old man, she called. Voice calm and practiced. Her perfume drifted through the morning air. Clean, synthetic, expensive. I watched her lock the car and walk away, heels tapping in neat rhythm. The sun hit the car's hood, bright enough to sting my eyes. On the table behind me sat my wife's photo, framed in oak. That single image was enough, a reminder of a crash years ago, of rules ignored. I didn't need to relive it every time the Porsche appeared. I turned back to the window and began my routine. Camera on, timestamp logged, license plate captured. She said 5 minutes. It was 47. Just facts. No emotion. That's how I used to train my inspectors. By the time she returned, the engine's growl had become part of the neighborhood's rhythm. She backed out, leaving a faint rubber kiss across my driveway. Small but deliberate. Boundaries matter. I recorded it again and added a neat line in the logbook. One day, one entry, one more pattern in the making. At the HOA meeting later, Veronica stood at the front of the room, hands clasped behind her back like a conductor before an orchestra. She spoke about community image, compliance, and civic harmony. Each word slid off her tongue like it had been polished for years. People smiled, nodded. She smiled too, not wide but controlled, like she was balancing power on her teeth. I stayed quiet in the back, noting her rhythm, not her rhetoric. Power in neighborhoods like this isn't loud. It's procedural, like paperwork filed against you before you know you've been named. When the meeting ended, she walked across the street, leaned on my fence, and tilted her head, still keeping notes. "Harrison," she asked. Soft, knowing. I met her gaze. "Always," I said. She gave a half laugh, almost kind. "You should get out more. Maybe plant something." Then she turned, sunlight catching the edge of her hair like a match's spark before it dies. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That night, I reviewed the footage. The car glided into view. Precise, predictable. I zoomed in and caught the HOA decal on her windshield. Number 412. I checked the HOA roster that evening. Decal 412 matched Veronica Sterling's registered vehicle. The payment log showed irregular deductions from the community fund. Subtle, small, but patterned. I saved a copy. The sticker wasn't just proof of parking, it was a key. I leaned back, thinking of how systems fail quietly when no one checks the math. I'd spent 15 years ensuring they didn't. People forget that the law is slow, but it never sleeps. I was building a case, piece by piece, before I ever touched a wrench. Later, I stood by the window again. The street was calm, the lamplight soft. My reflection looked older, sure, but still sharp where it mattered. I hadn't forgotten how to trace a trail from one violation to a criminal file. I still knew where to send a report, who would read it twice, and who owed me a favor from the bureau. Patience wasn't weakness. It was preparation. The next morning, 6:15 a.m., that same low rumble returned. She parked again. Closer this time, front bumper almost brushing my gate. Through the window, I saw her reach into her purse and pull out a folded flyer. Bright pink. She glanced at my house, smirked, and let it drop on my lawn before walking away. It fluttered face up against the grass. An invitation to her HOA charity gala. The date was bold. The sponsor line even bolder, funded by community maintenance fees. I stared at it for a long moment, then turned back to my desk. The file on my laptop waited, open to a fresh document. Subject: unauthorized use of HOA funds, Veronica Sterling. I typed the date, then paused. The engine outside gave one last reverend sharp as laughter before fading down the street. I smiled, slow and certain. She thought this was a game. She had no idea the rules had already changed. After a sleepless night, tightening reports and cross-checking the HOA ledger, I formatted the final draft and sent it by dawn. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about order, about drawing a line and making sure someone finally saw it. I attached the footage, timestamps, and a written summary addressed to the city's traffic compliance office. By sunrise, it was done. I believed that should have been enough, but Veronica Sterling never let anything end quietly. That evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly messaged cautious greetings. "Everything okay? Harrison, ignore the group posts." I opened the HOA network on my laptop. There it was, pinned at the top of the feed, Veronica's post. My face frozen mid-sentence, eyes narrowed, mouth open, clipped from my own security footage. The caption read, "This man screams at residents for no reason." Her voice was muted, replaced with a faint hiss. Her edits spliced from different days to make me look unhinged. The comments came fast. "He needs help. Someone should call a wellness check. Poor man, living alone too long." And then her reply under one thread. "We all try to be patient, but paranoia can make people dangerous." Her phrasing was perfect, just sympathetic enough to sound genuine. I leaned back and exhaled slowly. Defamation disguised as concern. A move I'd seen from professionals in uniform and boardrooms alike. She was good. By 8 that night. The street outside was quiet again. Curtains shifted when I walked past, neighbors nodding quickly before retreating. Even Captain Rodriguez from the local precinct, who had once worked traffic under me, called and said, "Let it go. Harrison. She donates a lot to community policing. It's a misunderstanding." His tone was polite, his meaning clear. When a favor outweighs a fact, the system is already bent. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. For a second, the house felt too quiet, like order had become another kind of loneliness. I opened my old government laptop, still authorized under limited credentials since my access remained active under an ongoing audit project. The federal database loaded slowly, the way old systems do, but it still obeyed. I entered her plate number. The report blinked through, line by line. 847 recorded parking violations in 5 years, all marked fee waived. Not one fine paid. Not one report escalated. It wasn't an oversight. It was protection. The printer hummed as I produced the summary. 5 pages of quiet corruption. Facts don't lie. They just wait for the right moment. I stacked the pages neatly, wrote the date, and sealed them in a brown envelope. I didn't rush. Evidence is stronger when it matures. At noon the next day, while trimming the hedge, I saw Veronica standing on her porch, phone in hand. She wore sunglasses. Though there was no sun, her voice was loud enough to carry. "Yes, I filed it," she said. "Elderly harassment, property intimidation." She laughed softly and turned her head toward me, her smile deliberate. She wanted me to hear every word. That was her second move, paint me as the aggressor before I could prove otherwise. That night, I replayed her post. The timestamps betrayed her. In one cut, the porch light behind her car flickered once. In the next, it glowed steady. Different mornings, different lies. I zoomed in, compared the frames, and took screenshots. I exported the proof with timestamps intact. One file. Clean, unarguable. Emma called later that evening. My daughter, 26, voice sharp from law school and sleepless study. "Dad, it sounds like you're building a case." "I am," I said. "Just make sure it's airtight," she replied. HOA boards survive on loopholes. There was pride hidden under her caution. I told her about the vehicle violations and the ledger discrepancies. She promised to verify the statute that allowed repeat violators' cars to be seized under the federal code. "Don't rush," she said. "But when you move, make it count. By then." My quiet house felt less like isolation and more like command. The monitors hummed, folders labeled by date, each containing another layer of truth. Every clip was a nail in the framework I was building. Slow and deliberate. Still, I knew Veronica wasn't finished. Power doesn't fade, it consolidates. The following morning, a blue envelope lay on my doorstep. HOA letterhead pressed clean. Notice of community review hearing. The board was calling a vote to censure me for harassment and recording without consent. It would be public. She wanted a spectacle before I could act. I smiled. She was weaponizing the process. That was fine. I had written those processes. The hearing 2 days later filled the community hall. Whispered voices. Polite smiles masking curiosity. Veronica stood at the podium, pen tapping against her notes. "We're gathered tonight because certain residents have created discomfort," she said, tone rehearsed. "No names, of course." She turned her eyes toward me briefly, feigning neutrality. "We value peace." When she opened the floor, I stood. "Agreed," I said. "Peace is built on accountability." I handed my folder to the board secretary. The room quieted. Paper makes a sound that cuts deeper than words. Her fingers tightened around the pen, though her smile stayed in place. "These are fabricated," she said. "You don't have jurisdiction." I met her gaze. Title 23, Section 7, Federal Statute. Your own HOA handbook quotes it. For 1 second, the mask slipped. It was enough. The chair called for a recess, citing procedural review. I left before the crowd started whispering again. At home, I called a colleague still working at the Federal Transportation Bureau. "Off record," I said. "Pattern of abuse tied to an HOA official." He paused, then replied, "Send it. We'll log it preliminarily." That was all I needed. A seed, planted quietly in federal soil. By 11 that night, the street was calm again. Veronica's Porsche sat angled across the curb, its headlights reflecting faintly off my mailbox. Not a full block, just enough to remind me she was still writing the narrative. I stepped closer to the window. Her arrogance wasn't just a habit. It was confidence born of protection. The engine idled once before dying. A subtle message. I smiled faintly, eyes on the darkened car. She wasn't done. Her move, my response. Phase 2. Even silence has a rhythm when you're waiting for an engine that always comes at dawn. 3 days passed without a single post from Veronica, but I still felt her presence in the air. The same way you feel heat from a machine long after it's been turned off. Every morning, I waited for the low hum across my gate, half expecting it, half missing it. She wasn't retreating. She was preparing. I knew that kind of calm. It was the kind that comes before escalation. Emma arrived that Friday evening, the crunch of gravel under her rental tires breaking the quiet. She stepped out, gray coat, steady posture, carrying 2 laptops and a stack of folders. "I thought you'd call sooner," she said. "Didn't want to drag you into HOA politics." I replied, "Dad, this isn't politics. It's control, inside." She laid her files on the dining table, boots still on, eyes already scanning the documents I'd left spread across the wood. We worked in silence for an hour. I showed her the violations, the ledger inconsistencies, and the hearing transcript. She processed everything with surgical precision, marking notes faster than I could answer. "The car's not the real story," she said finally. "The money is. Look here." She pointed to a line buried in the HOA expenses, labeled maintenance allocation. 1/4's payment was double. She's been using community funds to pay her private fines. "You're sure?" I asked. "Patterns don't lie," she said. We built the grid and the numbers began to align. Later that night, I called Frank Meyer, an old colleague now with the Department of Transportation. "Frank, I've got something," I said. "Possible misuse of HOA money tied to federal traffic accounts." He sighed. "Familiar and tired. You never call unless it's messy. Send it. We'll flag it as preliminary." His tone was neutral, but it meant he trusted me enough to move quietly. I hung up and let the hum of the line fade back into the still house. Emma stayed the night, turning the guest room into her command post, for the first time in years. The house didn't sound empty. "Over dinner?" she asked. "Why didn't you start this earlier?" "Because anger makes mistakes," I said. I needed proof before pride. She smiled faintly. Mom would have said the same thing. Her words landed like a quiet echo I hadn't expected. When she looked down at her plate, I felt something rare, a moment of purpose returning, the kind that feels almost like peace. By Sunday morning, our case was over 100 pages thick. Every document formed another step in the pattern violations linked to community accounts. Signatures recycled from old forms. Reimbursements disguised as safety improvements. It wasn't carelessness, it was architecture. Still, Emma wanted external validation. "We need the board minutes," she said. "Janet Palmer keeps those. She's loyal." I warned. Emma gave a half smile. Everyone's loyal until it costs them. At the neighborhood gathering that afternoon, Veronica glided through the crowd, greeting people like an actress taking a bow. Her hair was perfect, her timing perfect. When she saw Emma beside me, her smile sharpened. "You brought company," she said. "Just visiting," Emma answered. Veronica tilted her head slightly, the gesture precise, a weapon disguised as charm. "Harvard, wasn't it impressive?" She moved on before Emma could respond. Minutes later, Janet approached me quietly, eyes darting. "Be careful," she whispered. "She's calling a vote to remove you next week." "I figured," I said. Janet hesitated, then handed me a small flash drive. Minutes from the fiscal meeting. There were deletions before filing, if anyone asks. "You didn't get this." "Understood." She left quickly, blending into the crowd. That night, Emma and I opened the files. The missing lines showed reimbursements under public safety, each transfer matching a fine attached to Veronica's car. Emma leaned back. "That's direct embezzlement," she said. "And the signatures forged," I said. "Sloppy, too. Same pen pressure, same timing. We saved the documents, encrypted them, and logged them as evidence. I didn't bother naming folders this time. I logged the threat under evidence and moved on. Monday came with another message, printed on glossy cardstock and tucked under my mailbox flag. "Reminder, property evaluation pending." She was telling me she knew. At 6:15 a.m., the Porsche stopped 50 feet from my gate. Veronica stepped out, coat drawn tight, and paused before sliding a folded note into the slot. She looked at my window, just long enough to make sure I saw the smirk before turning away. After she left, I retrieved it. The note read, "You don't want to embarrass yourself. Harrison. Some doors are better left closed." I scanned it once and placed it in the evidence file. No anger, no reaction. Emma read it later and said, "She's scared." "No," I said. "She's confident." "There's a difference." That afternoon, Frank called back. "We verified the trail," he said. "There's a link between HOA maintenance funds and a private vehicle account under Sterling's name. You're not alone in this. Janet Palmer filed a whistleblower complaint 2 weeks ago." I paused, letting the weight of that settle. Then the wheels already turning. "Exactly. Keep your distance. Audit's coming." That night, I sat by the window again. The house felt less like solitude and more like focus. Emma's typing from the other room sounded like steady rain. I glanced toward the street, empty, calm, too calm. I opened the binder one last time. Everything fits now. Her violations, the missing minutes, the money trail they connected like gears in motion, the kind of system that looks perfect until one cog refuses to turn. Emma joined me, arms crossed, watching the street. "You think she'll come after you?" she asked. "No," I said. "She'll send someone," as if on cue. The motion sensor blinked. A dark SUV eased to a stop near the corner. Headlights dimmed, engine steady. I zoomed in just enough to catch the shape of a driver's silhouette before saving the clip. "You think it's her?" Emma whispered. "Probably," I said. "Or someone she owes." The SUV didn't move, didn't flash its lights, didn't back away. I turned off the monitor, the hum of electronics fading into the still air. Outside. The engine remained, a soft growl beneath the dark. The SUV idled in the night, patient as her ambition. The audit notice arrived on a Tuesday morning. Crisp paper inside a sealed federal envelope. The header bore the insignia of the Department of Transportation, sharp and undeniable. The paper smelled of consequence, its weight heavier than it should have been. Bureaucracy moves slowly, but when it finally turns, it cuts clean and deep. Veronica had spent years bending rules, and now the law she stretched too far was straightening itself. I set the envelope beside my coffee and watched the sunlight crawl across the table, slow and deliberate. like the start of something irreversible. Emma entered the kitchen, her hair still damp, the morning light brushing against her face. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked. I nodded once. "Preliminary audit. Federal jurisdiction. They're reviewing HOA accounts and vehicle records." She leaned closer, scanning the letter carefully. "She'll know by noon," she said. "Let her," I replied, calm and certain. The system works better when it's watched. Emma exhaled softly, her eyes thoughtful. "You've waited a long time for this." "Too long," I said quietly. By midday, the neighborhood began to hum with rumors moving under closed doors. The HOA chat went silent, and Veronica's morning post vanished without a trace. By afternoon, she replaced the board's agenda with a single message: Temporary Financial Review Committee formed. It sounded bureaucratic enough to soothe the nervous, but I recognized it for what it was: panic disguised as procedure. Federal audits don't wait for permission, they arrive with signatures, not requests. And once they start, nothing can pause their rhythm. That evening, I finalized the evidence package that had taken months to build. 500 pages of proof, each verified, bound like a verdict waiting to be read. It wasn't about formatting or appearance, but weight, the kind that makes silence lean forward to listen. Emma stood beside me as I sealed the box, her voice low. "Once you send this," she said, "everything changes. It already has." I answered. Her eyes held the question she didn't ask, the one about what happens after justice. Neither of us said it. At 8 p.m., I emailed the final dossier to the department liaison and copied the Federal Compliance Office. Within seconds, the confirmation reply appeared on the screen, precise as a gavel strike. Outside, the night wind rattled the flag by my mailbox, a sharp, clean sound that no longer belonged to her. I sat for a moment, letting the quiet stretch out, the way silence does when a chapter ends. For the first time in months, I felt the stillness wasn't waiting for anything more from me. The next morning, a white metal sign appeared on my front lawn, stamped with federal lettering: Traffic Investigation Zone, no unauthorized parking. I hadn't requested it, but someone in the bureau had issued it automatically. That was how the system declared ownership, without ceremony, without debate. 50 feet of authority now separated my gate from her arrogance. I looked at it for a long while before turning away, the boundary suddenly visible in ways that went beyond steel or ink. Veronica arrived just after noon, her Porsche rolling to a stop just short of the new sign. She stepped out, sunglasses hiding her eyes, her voice even. "So it's true," she said. "Federal now." Her posture held, but the edge of control trembled faintly beneath the surface. "You think a sign scares me?" she added, though she didn't move closer. "You built this wall yourself, Harrison." Then she turned, took a photo of the sign, and walked away, her heels striking the pavement like slow, deliberate metronomes of defiance. By late afternoon, 2 black sedans pulled up in front of her house. The agents didn't announce themselves because they didn't need to. They moved with quiet precision, carrying sealed warrants, gloves, and clipboards. Neighbors lingered near their mailboxes, pretending disinterest while watching everything. Within an hour, the agents emerged carrying boxes labeled financial records. Veronica stood on her porch, still as marble, her phone clutched in her hand. The performance was over. Reality had taken the stage. That night, Emma and I sat watching the local news from the dim glow of the living room. Federal authorities have begun auditing the Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association, the reporter announced. Sources indicate possible misuse of public funds. Emma turned to me, her expression unreadable. They're careful not to name her. They're giving her the grace she never gave anyone, I said. But grace expires. She nodded once, the light flickering across her eyes like quiet understanding. At 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent a picture of my mailbox. Lock snapped, seal torn. Beneath it, a single message read, "You think you've won." I didn't respond. Instead, I saved it, forwarded it to Frank, and went outside to replace the lock myself. Fixing small things had become a habit, an act of quiet control. The sound of metal turning under my hand was its own kind of peace. I didn't need words to win, just time and proof. 2 days later, Frank called with a tone I recognized from old field reports. "It's confirmed," he said. "Misuse of HOA funds tied directly to her vehicle account. She's officially under federal review." I paused. "How deep does it go?" "Deep enough that it won't stop with her," he replied. The satisfaction that settled in me wasn't joy, only precision aligning itself at last. Justice doesn't celebrate. It simply balances the scale. The board meeting that night unfolded under fluorescent light, half the seats empty. Veronica opened the session with the same practiced calm she'd used for years. "We're here to clarify misinformation," she said. "No laws were broken. The audit is routine." I stood slowly, the sound of the chair scraping louder than any words. "Then you won't mind if the record shows the falsified payments." She glared, voice clipped. "You are not recognized." "Title 23, Section 7, I replied. The federal agent seated in the back nodded once. "Proceed." "Mr. Cross." I laid the documents on the table, each page a nail in the coffin of her control. 5 years of unauthorized transactions, I said. $200,000 diverted from community funds, signatures fabricated, records altered, gasps filled the air. Veronica's jaw tensed, her voice thin. "You can't prove intent." I looked at her evenly. "Intent isn't required when the evidence speaks for itself." The agent rose, calm and expressionless. "Ms. Sterling, please come with us." Outside, the press waited like carrion circling the truth. Cameras flashed as Veronica was escorted to the waiting car. For once, she had no speech, no audience, no script to hide behind. The car door shut with a solid thud that echoed down the street. Final and complete. People whispered, some in shock, others in quiet relief. For the first time, Oakwood Heights sounded honest again. Back home, I stood by the gate, the federal sign gleaming under the porch light. Emma joined me, her voice soft. "So this is justice." "No," I said. "This is a consequence. Justice takes longer." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain and clean pavement. Somewhere beyond that stillness, I felt the world settle back into place. The engines faded. The air smelled clean. For once, the quiet didn't ask for proof. The morning began without sound, a stillness too sharp to trust. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath as the hour crept towards 6:15 a.m. I stood at the window, coffee cooling in my hand, waiting for the inevitable. Then it came the low growl of the Porsche, coiling around the quiet like a threat remembered. Veronica's car turned the corner, crimson paint glinting under the dawn. She parked squarely in front of my gate, as if the sign, the investigation, and the warrants had all been a bad dream that she could erase with defiance. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 men stood near the curb, security by their posture, not by uniform. She stepped out, her expression smooth, hair fixed, perfume cutting through the morning chill. Her eyes found my camera, then me. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that said she still believed she owned the narrative. "One last act," I murmured to myself. "Let's make it count." Behind her, the men adjusted their jackets, scanning the street, unaware they were being recorded from 5 separate angles. At precisely 6:30, I opened the gate. "You're on federal property now," I said evenly. "Your vehicle violates Title 23, Section 7.3.2. Veronica tilted her head, amused. "You think they'll come for me again? It's just a car." "Harrison." I glanced toward the corner, where 3 flatbed trucks were waiting, engines idling softly. "Yes," I said. "Exactly that." Her eyes flickered, realizing the scale too late. The trucks moved as one, pulling up beside her Porsche, yellow vests glinting under the early light. The lead officer stepped forward, holding a clipboard. "Federal Vehicle Removal Protocol. Case reference 9865, he announced. "This vehicle has been cited 1,000 times for repeated violations under the jurisdictional code. Authorization confirmed." Veronica's calm fractured, just slightly. "You can't destroy my property," she said. "You'll answer for this." "So will you," I said quietly. "Every frame, every fine, every payment traced to stolen funds. The record speaks for itself." The officer signaled the crew. Within moments, tools clattered, bolts loosened, and the sound of machinery filled the air. Neighbors emerged from their houses, Drawn by the noise, some whispered, some filmed, others simply watched. The Porsche's mirror was removed first, then the doors, then the leather seats, each piece labeled and tagged. The red chassis gleamed like a carcass under surgical light. The smell of rubber and oil hung in the air. Veronica stood motionless, her phone still in her hand, but no call could stop the process. The crowd grew 200 residents filling the sidewalks, faces lit by screens and sunrise. Across the street, Janet Palmer, the quiet board member who had once slipped me meeting notes, stood with her phone raised. She was live streaming. "This is Oakwood Heights," she said, her voice steady. "This is what accountability looks like." The counter on her screen climbed 10,000, 50,000, 500,000. The hashtag blinked bright on the display, "Parking Karma Justice." Veronica finally moved, stepping forward, shouting something lost beneath the noise of metal tearing. The trucks didn't stop. Federal procedure never does. The final piece of the Porsche was lifted, a twisted frame that once symbolized her power. It hung in the air for a moment before being secured onto the flatbed. The officer affixed a sign, "Evidence, 1,000 violations." Cameras clicked. Shutters flashed. The neighborhood had turned courtroom, and the sentence was visible to all. Veronica's voice cracked. "Do you realize what you've done?" she screamed. I met her eyes. "Steady. I didn't destroy your car." "Veronica, you did. I just made sure everyone saw it." By the time the trucks pulled away, the street was covered in traces of oil and dust. The sun climbed higher, pale gold washing over the remnants of spectacle. Emma stepped beside me, phone in hand. "It's everywhere," she said. "News outlets, legal blogs, federal feeds, they're all picking it up." I nodded, though the satisfaction that came wasn't triumph, it was release, the kind that follows too many quiet mornings waiting for justice to wake. The sound of the trucks faded, leaving behind a hollow calm. Then, from down the street, a convoy of black SUVs appeared, moving with the precision of inevitability. The crowd parted instinctively as federal agents stepped out, badges flashing. One of them, a woman in a dark suit, approached Veronica. "Veronica Sterling," she said, "you are under arrest for federal embezzlement and obstruction of justice." The words landed cleanly, final. Veronica tried to speak, but the sound never came. The cuffs clicked, the camera zoomed in, and Oakwood Heights fell completely silent. Janet kept streaming, her hand trembling slightly but her voice steady. "Let this be proof," she said. "Law still matters." Behind her, the agents guided Veronica into the SUV. The door shut with a soft thud, and the convoy pulled away. The crowd dispersed slowly, the morning light now ordinary again. Emma turned to me. "You planned all this, didn't you?" I looked at the empty spot where the Porsche had stood. "No," I said. "I just documented what was already happening." We stood there for a while, neither speaking. The air carried the faint tang of metal and fuel, a reminder that power, once exposed, burns itself out. The HOA board would collapse by noon. The city would file its notice by evening, and by tomorrow. The story would belong to the world. But for me, this wasn't revenge, it was repair. When the noise ended, I felt something I hadn't in years, quiet that didn't feel fragile. The street lay empty now, sunlight tracing the clean edge of my new boundary sign. I turned toward the house, the weight of the past 5 years beginning to lift. The system had finally spoken, and it hadn't raised its voice. Emma rested her hand on my shoulder, silent. We didn't need words for closure. The sound of engines leaving was enough. For the first time in Oakwood Heights, silence felt like respect. The day after the arrest, Oakwood Heights woke differently. The air carried a kind of silence that felt deliberate, earned. No engines, no exhaust, no arrogance humming at dawn. Just the soft rhythm of sprinklers, distant footsteps, and the rustle of leaves along clean driveways. I stepped outside at 6:15 a.m. with my coffee, the same time I used to dread, and listened. Nothing came. For the first time in years, the quiet wasn't an absence, it was an answer. The street was open, untouched, and perfectly ordinary. Across the way, neighbors who had once looked through me now waved. A few even stopped to talk. Respect, it turned out. was contagious when people finally saw what it cost to lose it. The HOA sign that once bore Veronica Sterling's name had been taken down, replaced by a temporary notice Oakwood Heights Interim Reform Committee. Bureaucratic, yes, but honest in its intent. Change rarely announces itself with noise. It begins with people remembering how to look each other in the eye again. By noon, the official sentence came through 3 years in federal prison and $5 million in restitution. Justice doesn't celebrate. It simply balances the scale. The residents gathered by the board to read the notice, murmuring, no outrage, no applause, just the steady weight of consequence settling where denial used to live. For once, the system had spoken, not through rage but through process, and people listened. That was enough. Later that day, a young woman stood at my gate, hands clasped tight. Her face was familiar, softer, but with the same eyes. "You're Ashley Sterling," I said. She nodded, voice trembling. "I came to apologize. My mother hurt people. I didn't see it before. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and thank you for not destroying her." I looked at her for a moment, then nodded once. "Boundaries matter," I said, "even when it's painful to keep them." She smiled faintly, tears bright in the afternoon light, and walked away. Emma found me later, carrying a folder of legal drafts. "They want us on the HOA Reform Council," she said. "They're offering a consulting retainer." I smiled, slow and tired. "So they finally value what they used to ignore." She shrugged. "People change when they see proof." I watched her as she spoke, proud in a way words couldn't hold. "Start something new," I told her. "A firm that protects homeowners. Make the law work for people, not power." She nodded. "Justice consultancy," she said. "Simple, steady, and clean." "Exactly," I replied. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood mended itself. Fences repainted, sidewalks repaired, and finances audited in public meetings. The air felt lighter, the conversations kinder. The same people who once whispered now volunteered. I installed a new steel gate, automatic, quiet, precise, on its inner frame. I placed a small brass plaque. Respect is the simplest form of law. Not for show, but as a promise. Each time the gate closed with a low mechanical sigh. It sounded like order finding its way home. One evening, Emma found me by the garden, holding the photo of her mother, the same one that had rested beside my desk through everything. "You still miss her," she said softly. "Every day," I answered. "But now it feels different, like she's part of what kept me steady." Emma rested a hand on my shoulder. "You did right by her." "No," I said. "The law did. I just trusted it long enough to work." She smiled, quiet and proud. "Then that's the legacy worth keeping." Months later, Oakwood Heights held its first fair since the reform. Children played. Music drifted across trimmed lawns, and the sound of laughter filled the air where fear once lived. I stood near the fence, watching the reflection of sunlight in the polished steel of the new gate for the first time in years. Peace didn't feel like surrender. It felt like proof that justice, when earned properly, restores more than it takes. The community hadn't just survived the scandal. It had grown into something honest. That night, I placed a single white flower beside my wife's picture. "We made it," I whispered. "It took time, but the world remembers balance." The reflection staring back at me looked older, but at peace. The hum of crickets replaced the engine noise that had haunted me for years. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full of truth, of consequence, of calm earned by patience. At the Bureau's annual ethics symposium, they screened the footage of the Porsche dismantling as part of a training program titled "The Power of Lawful Accountability." Watching it play on the projector, I didn't feel pride so much as confirmation, proof that order, when pursued without ego, could still inspire. The applause came politely at the end, but I just smiled. Justice doesn't need applause. It only needs to be seen working. Now, every dawn feels like a clean page. The street stays empty, the air honest, and the gate opens to a world that has finally learned its lesson. The system didn't need me to fight harder. It needed me to stay steady long enough for it to catch up. Justice may crawl, but it never stops moving. I learned that truth when patient always wins. Quietly, inevitably, completely. Every boundary you defend, every truth you protect, begins with one calm act of integrity. Justice doesn't roar, it whispers through patience, evidence, and courage. If this story reminded you that strength isn't in anger but in order, carry it forward. Let it shape how you face the next unfairness parked in your way. Because law, when guided by humanity, isn't cold. It's clarity with compassion. That's what Karma Clause stands for: accountability without cruelty, strength through restraint, and the reminder that karma doesn't forget. Truth doesn't rush, but it always arrives.